Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to welcome you here to this Policy Committee meeting on Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. This is our first Policy Committee meeting with our new board members, and both of them chose to give their time and their sacrifice to be a part of this Policy Committee meeting. So we just want to recognize them. Mr. Nixon and Mr. Cunningham both joined us in November, and we're very excited to have this first Policy Committee with them and to hear their input. We also have Ms. Williams, our Superintendent of Education here, Ms. Jasmine Drain, our Legal Counsel, and Ms. Linda Hyman and Dr. Bagley is here with us as well. So we do have a meeting coming up at 6 o'clock, a regularly scheduled board meeting, so we are somewhat time constrained, but I think with our agenda we'll be able to get through these. So we'll just go ahead and jump in and get started. Item 1.02 is Policy CCA, which is our organizational chart. And Superintendent Williams, I will just turn that over to you, and you can kind of let us know where we're at with that, and then we'll go from there.
So most definitely, thank you, Mr. Irwin. All right, thank you, Mr. Irwin. Basically, if everyone would look at Policy CCA, which is our organizational chart, currently, under the Assistant Superintendent of Operational Management, we have the Director of Athletics. I would like to change that title to the Executive Director of Athletic Operations. Nothing in the job description has changed, only the title will be changed to Executive Director of Athletic Operations.
And Superintendent Williams, that is the only change on that entire chart?
Yes, that's
okay.
The only change.
Can I ask, just for clarification purposes, the way it looks to me, looking at the chart, is that the communications coordinator, the director of human resources, and the principals and director of TCTC report to the chief financial officer. Is that correct, or do all of those direct reports back to you?
They go directly to me.
Okay.
So the chief financial officer, communications coordinator, human resources, and all of the principals and directors, they report directly to me.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, based on the way I was looking at it, because under Assistant Superintendent of Operational Management and Assistant Superintendent of Academic and Affairs, those people under them report back to those first, exactly, whereas the four in the middle are direct reports back to you. Just wanted to clarify that.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Nixon, Mr. Cunningham, are there any questions or concerns, comments about Policy CCA?
None.
Okay. And again, just to reiterate what Superintendent Williams said, the change is in title only. There is no change as far as duties, responsibilities, anything like that. It is only a change in the title. Only in the title. Very well. Okay. Anyone else, anything to add from that? We do have members of our staff and members of the public here with us tonight. We always say at our policy committee meetings these are a little bit more informal, and we welcome your feedback or questions if you have any. But if not, we will move on to our next item, which is policy item 1.03, policy KF. And that is the community use of school facilities. I was going to refer this back to Attorney Drain, Superintendent Williams, unless you have some initial comments you would like to make first.
Well, I would just like to make a comment that, as we were looking at this policy, we noticed that there were some gaps, and we wanted to fill those gaps. Dr. Wright, our Assistant Superintendent of Operational Management, did draft a policy, and we will use that for reference as we're going through this policy. But for now, we are going to look at our current policy with some of the updates that our attorneys have made for us. So we'll look at that, but we'll also go back and look at some of the suggestions that our Assistant Superintendent has suggested for us as well. Attorney Drain, you might speak well to what's been added to this policy.
And I do just want to point out very quickly, if I'm looking at this correctly, Ms. Jasmine, this has not been touched or amended in any way since 2017. So there is probably going to be quite a bit of work that needs to be done that'll probably require maybe the full board's input on this. So this may be a policy that we're looking at for a little while.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, this policy is going to require a lot of work and input. And Dr. Wright, as Ms. Williams mentioned, did a lot of work in presenting the board with some, samples that they consider, because one of the things I think that needed to be looked at is when you're looking at the type of facilities that are being rented and used, the fee schedules and what those fees should be when you're trying to determine the length or duration that a facility can be used for, setting perimeters for that. Also looking at when memorandums of agreement are going to be required for which properties and what kind of restrictions are going to apply. But I did want to, probably one of the most important things, or important reasons to amend this policy is, I am aware that the district does own certain property, the Blackstreet property, and I think that there's a need to try to have some language that would help to govern, or some guidelines to address the use of that particular property, because based on the deed that governs that property, there are certain restrictions, and that would help to guide use or any requests moving forward. So that was one of the things, one of the major changes to the proposed policy was adding some language in there to address the use of special properties, which would include the Blackstreet property. But because we are going to amend this particular policy, as you pointed out, the last time it was changed was in 2017. There are a lot of other things that you probably want to consider, and Dr. Wright has provided us with, different issues that you want to address, those gaps that Ms. Williams referenced that'll need to be filled. But some of the things, that are listed here, they were in your previous policy. Usually it's very clear that priority is going to be given to, the district and school-related events. So that has not changed in terms of making it clear the priority of use. What has changed, though, are different things about, for one example, if you wanted to make your rentals available for use for any type of church, if they were, let's say, undergoing a new renovation and they didn't have a church to use. Some districts will allow that, and so I know the old policy didn't account for that. That's something that's in this one if the board wanted to consider that. And then everything else, there's language that would address whether or not groups maybe did not intend to raise money by the use of their property, but there's some language in there where that particular situation could be addressed if they were using the facilities for something and there was a charge or fee associated with their use. Because typically, it's restricted to nonprofits, and so property is you're generally prohibited from raising money, revenue by use of district property. So there's some language in there that might address these particular situations a little bit better. But again, I think this is something that the board is just going to need to go through and determine kind of what you want to keep from your old policy, what you want to add, and there needs to be a lot of discussion about fee schedules and things like that. So, that's just.
I do just want to clarify very quickly for those who may be listening online, or maybe even for some in here, as Ms. Jasmine is referring to the Blackstreet property, we are not referring to Blackstreet Early Childhood Center. We are referring to what used to be Old Bulldog Stadium and that property, and there are some very specific regulations that guide how that property is used, and so that's one of the reasons why we're looking at this policy. Superintendent Williams, I will turn it back over to you. Do you have anything additional about this at this time?
No, I do not have anything additional, but, I do agree with Attorney Drain that we really need to look at this policy deeper.
Sure.
And add those administrative rules such as fee schedules, so that everything is concise, and we are addressing all of our properties to include the old Bulldog Stadium and any other properties that the district has in the event community members ask to rent. We'll have something in writing to govern it.
Sure. And I do, again, policy committee members, I think this is going to be something that is going to take the entire board's input on, but I would like us to do our due diligence with Ms. Jasmine as far as coming up with the more we can have done to present to the board, maybe the easier that process will be. So this will be something that will be on the agenda for, I'm sure, the foreseeable future, as it's a pretty lengthy policy that needs to be gone through rather carefully. Yes, ma'am?
I want to clarify, it is on the agenda today for first reading. The policy is, but what we're looking at right now is the policy, but what would also need to be incorporated, as Ms. Williams mentioned, would be the adoption of a rule, a fee schedule, application or exhibit, as well as maybe a second administrative rule that would only govern special properties such as the old Bulldog Stadium. So what you're seeing here were just suggested revisions to the policy only, not to the administrative rule. And Dr. Wright had done a lot of research and provided some, very, good samples and models for the board's consideration of things that you might want to incorporate in your rule when that's revised, as well as fee schedules and things like that.
So I think, policy committee members, I think probably the best course of action just from this body would be maybe to suggest we table this or postpone this in our actual meeting until we have more of a chance to look at this and look at these guidelines and stuff. Any other comments, questions, Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Nixon?
Actually, I was going to suggest the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Because this is a great deal of information to go through.
Yes, sir, it is.
And we need to scrutinize it before we put it out to the rest of the board to.
I agree.
vote on.
I agree. I think just the suggestion from this body tonight in our regularly scheduled board meeting will be that we either table this or postpone it until a later date when we have a little bit more opportunity to go through it. Any other questions, comments? Anything from any of our members of the public? Dr. Wright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the board committee. Some other things related to this policy I would like to bring to the superintendent's and board's attention. Of course, the superintendent already knows already, but for the board's attention for your consideration is that there are any number of language potential loopholes within this policy that needs to be addressed. It presents current challenges for the current administration to approve or non-approve the use of facilities in our current reality. I'll give you an example of some of those loopholes that need to be addressed. There's a bullet point that talks about liability insurance. There's a misunderstanding between the amount less than $300,000 per person and per occurrence, $600,000. The current best practice for liability insurance for many of our school districts across South Carolina is $1 million plus. So that's an example of a sentence that needs to be rethought or reconsidered by the Board of Education. Another one will be bullet point number 4 that's on the policy that states about supplemental education services. We no longer engage in SES services in the state of South Carolina under federal program. So that statement no longer is a valid statement to include the statement before that. We need to clarify for public information in writing what do we mean by nonprofit. All nonprofit organizations by federal government standards must have a 501(c)(3). So that kind of language needs to be clarified and be specific. We don't engage in rental agreements with the South Carolina Department of Education. As an example, it will be the third bullet from the bottom. Needs to be clarified. So presenting the board with some options to clarify and to tighten up our policy will really help the community to understand the value of our district facilities, down to reevaluating how much we are charging people for the use of our facilities. Energy costs have gone up, costs for personnel have gone up.
Sure.
And the board needs to strongly consider those in a deliberation of revising that policy for our school district. I think the more that we can tighten that policy, we don't want to send a message that our buildings are not available, but I think we need to send a message that we need people to take care of our facilities and do it the right way.
Absolutely. Dr. Wright, we appreciate that input and those things to consider as well. Is there anyone else from the public or from the staff? I see we have, I think, all of our other board members here, if anyone has anything to add to that. Ms. Yasmin, I would just ask kind of a legal question. As we are reviewing this policy, is there a need or is there a process for us to pause future facility use or limit that in some way until we can get some of these things ironed out and figured out? Or is that something that, I'm not even aware, Superintendent Williams, of how much we're being asked to use and rent facilities and those things, but I just wonder if while we're going through this, with some of the issues that Dr. Wright has brought up, if maybe we need to pause or somehow until we can get some of this stuff ironed out.
Right. Well, my concern with that would be, I do have several applications on my desk at this moment that I'm looking at, for this current school year. And I just think we need to, use what we already have in place so that the community can have somewhere that they can utilize for their special events, different things like that, and utilize the fee schedule that we already have in place until we make those changes.
Okay.
There may be some properties that this board or, may think that we might need to limit the use for right now. I do know that in the policy that the attorneys wrote for us, they added some of the, like the old Bulldog Stadium, because that was not currently listed in the other policy.
Correct.
So they added that. So,
And I fully recognize that decision would need to be made by our full board.
Right.
But I did not know if maybe, if we needed to take some sort of steps like that, if that needed to be a recommendation from this policy committee in order to do that. But I mean, if our legal counsel is to just keep going with what we've got until something else is in place, then so be it.
I think as Superintendent Williams had stated, it's still possible to be able to still respond to requests, and if there's any deficiencies with the request or some issue, we can consult and figure out the best way to address it until you're able to adopt a policy. I would just say, obviously, for special property, that might be a distinction, and I know we're scheduled to have discussion in the executive session regarding, special properties. So that might be the exception.
Okay.
Not have to pause, but again, that's something that will be discussed later. But I do think for any other request, that you continue with your current policy, that there just might be specific issues that can be reviewed and consulted before, final decisions are made. But I think it's still workable and manageable.
Very well. Anyone else? Anything? All right, hearing nothing else, we'll move on to item 1.04, which is policy GCEC, which is the posting and advertising of professional vacancies. And I don't know, are we going to Attorney Drain or Superintendent Williams first? Who gets first crack at this?
I'll give it to Attorney Drain for this one.
Just something that was placed on the agenda, just because we know that there had been some questions that came up about the policy or just advertising in general. And, one of the things that we just thought it was important to clarify with this particular policy is, whether or not posting is mandatory, if it's required, or if it's discretionary. And if you look at, district policies around the state, you'll see it's discretionary. Your policy currently has language that would make it mandatory to post certain positions. And so that was one of the things that we just wanted to bring to the policy committee's attention so that you might review it and maybe give consideration to adding that, if the board desired, the more discretionary language within the policy policy as it relates to posting, because sometimes there might be some exceptions that apply that would not make it feasible or desirable to post. And so if, many districts around the state have that more discretionary language, but it's at the board's, discretion. But we did want to bring that to this committee's attention so that if as you're looking at reviewing policies, that is one of the revisions that might be considered.
And again, just to our new policy committee members, you'll look at the bottom of this policy, you'll see that the last time any revisions were made were in 2019. As you go through our current policy manual, unfortunately, you're going to see that a lot of our policies haven't been touched in quite a while. So this committee, maybe unknowing to you when you volunteered to serve on it, has a great deal of work to do to make sure that our policies are up to date and where they need to be with the changing world and changing environment that we live in. So again, this is just another one of those, and Superintendent Williams, I would love to hear your input on this, but something that we just need to kind of give a little bit more direction in on how we're going to do this moving forward.
Yes, so I do have a question, Attorney Drain. Is there a model policy through the School Board Association that we may be able to look at in order to make some decisions? Because you're right, I think the district needs to have more flexibility, because sometimes, we have things that may come up that may need to be filled, so that we can make sure that we're serving our kids in the best manner possible. So I would really like to see a model policy from the School Board Association.
The school board, the school board has one. We have one that we can share also, and just providing some examples. For instance, the way that the current policy reads is that except in extreme emergencies, the administration will advertise all job vacancies within the district for at least 3 calendar days. You might have some other, what is an extreme emergency? Some districts will actually outline, give some examples of scenarios in which you would not, and I'll just list this as an example. Sometimes an exception might be where the reassignment of an employee to another position at the same organizational level, that might be, a scenario. The existence of a pressing condition requiring the vacancy to be filled immediately. The demotion or reassignment of an employee for disciplinary performance or other reasons, or a previous posted position with a new vacancy at the same organizational level within 45 days of the original posting. So there might be, various situations in which posting might not be feasible or idea. And so just, maybe give some consideration to broadening that language so that it's clear as to when the district may not post for a particular position, and I'll be glad to share the model policy as well as what we have.
And I guess my question to our attorney would be, given, as you said, the state of things in our world and our nation now, are we going to have to go back and rewrite some of our posting statements? As in,
Yes.
because we make reference here to, not discriminating against anybody's genetic information. Is that going to be a problem with the current things coming down the pike that are against anything that is non-discriminatory?
No, I'll say this, we're getting, as we get, different orders or regulations change, that's something that we're constantly doing. If there's a new law that's enacted, if there's new regulations, if there's new executive orders, that's sometimes the guide to go back and review certain policies and make your policies consistent with those new regulations or orders. Sometimes the State Department might send memos to districts around the state, making districts aware of changes in the law or changes to regulations.
And so they were keeping you on your toes.
And so as a result, that trickles down. And so based on whatever those changes are, then we have to go through and identify, okay, what policies implicate these particular issues, and then make changes based on that. So yes, to answer your question.
Hopefully both of you guys are getting the emails from the State School Board Association. They are very good as well about sending us, even in their legislative update, be on the lookout, this may come down the road kind of thing. So our attorneys in the State School Board Association are very good about legal things. Hey, take a look at your policy and make sure these things. So that is a very good question, and something that we are very fortunate to have attorneys who help us stay on top of those things. I will just kind of throw this out there to our two new policy members. One of the complaints in our county for the school board for years and years and years now has been transparency. So even as we're looking at a policy like this about what positions need to be posted, what don't, we also need to think about community perception and are they, you know, is there any lack of transparency in what we do? So as we're looking at this policy, as we're trying to figure out the correct way to move forward and the language to change and all, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. We want to make sure that we're above board and transparent. Nobody can question motives or intents with any of the things that we do. Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Nixon, anything else?
No. I think I'm good for now.
Superintendent Williams, anything?
No, I'm good.
Anything from any of our wonderful people joining us tonight? Yes?
Sterling, I'd just like to request that the committee consider a regular committee date that is scheduled on a non-board meeting evening, or so that the discussions that are had by the committee can be fully reviewed by board members before any action is necessary. I know this month has been off in that we postponed a number of meetings, but to have policies on the agenda this evening that are being reviewed by the committee on the same day makes it hard for forward advancement. So I would like to request that you consider a more regular scheduled meeting date that is not on the same day as the board meeting.
Very well.
We can certainly do that. I'm retired.
Anyone else, anything? Did you say you're retired?
I'm retired. I have time.
All right, hearing nothing else, we will consider this policy committee meeting in adjournment, and we will get together and try to figure out our next date for our next policy committee meeting, and then we will get ready for our regular scheduled board meeting here in a few months. Thank you.